3 months of planning, 2 years without a single day off. I was practically feeling the white Florida sand between my toes when the email came. Urgent situation, cancel your vacation. We need you in the office. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I just smiled. Because I knew he'd just made a $100,000 mistake. My name is Elena Moss. And for the past 5 years, I've been the person who keeps BrightPath Solutions from imploding. Officially, I'm a human resources manager. Unofficially, I'm the fixer, the mediator, the one who stays until midnight sorting out other people's messes while they're home having dinner with their families. BrightPath Solutions sits in a gleaming glass tower in downtown Hartford, Connecticut. From the outside, it screams success, marble lobbies, fresh flowers at reception. The kind of place that looks great on LinkedIn profiles. We're a management consulting firm specializing in digital transformation solutions, which is corporate speak for teaching other companies how to use spreadsheets more efficiently while charging them obscene amounts of money. But inside, it's a different story. The company culture here could best be described as polite cannibalism. Everyone smiles while they're stabbing you in the back. The executives preach work-life balance during all-hands meetings, then send urgent emails at 11 p.m. expecting immediate responses. They talk about being a family, while treating employees like replaceable cogs in their profit machine. And then there's Craig Donnell, Vice President of Operations, my direct supervisor, and the human embodiment of everything wrong with corporate America. Picture a man in his mid-40s who still talks about his fraternity days like they were the pinnacle of human achievement. Pressed shirts that cost more than most people's rent. A Rolex he checks constantly during meetings. And that particular brand of arrogance that comes from failing upward his entire career. Craig's the type who schedules 4:30 p.m. meetings on Fridays and acts surprised when people seem unhappy about it. Our relationship has always been complicated. To his face, I'm professional, efficient, the model employee. Yes, Craig. I'll handle it, Craig. No problem at all, Craig. But underneath that polished exterior, I've been keeping score. Every unpaid overtime hour, every credit he's taken for my work, every time he's called me sweetheart in meetings and then claimed it was just being friendly when I reported it. I'm good at what I do, too good, really. When the payroll system crashed, I was the one who manually calculated checks for 200 employees. When we faced a discrimination lawsuit, I was the one who navigated us through it, saving the company hundreds of thousands in potential damages. When COVID hit and we had to transition to remote work overnight, guess who wrote all the policies and procedures while Craig was working from home on his boat? The thing about being indispensable is that people start taking you for granted. They assume you'll always be there, always available, always willing to sacrifice your own life for the company's bottom line. Craig certainly did. In his mind, I wasn't Elena Moss, a human being with needs and boundaries. I was a resource to be exploited, a safety net for his incompetence. I'd been planning this vacation for 3 months, not just thinking about it, actually planning. Spreadsheets comparing flight prices, reviews of hotels, a day-by-day itinerary color-coded and laminated. 2 weeks in Florida. My first real break in 2 years. I'd submitted the request through proper channels, gotten it approved in writing, even trained Jessica from accounting to cover my essential duties. The last time I'd taken time off was for my root canal. And even then, Craig had called me 4 times while I was still numb from Novocaine. But this time was going to be different. This time, I dotted every I and crossed every T. The tickets were non-refundable. The hotel was paid in full. I'd even bought new swimsuits. Optimistic purchases for a woman who'd grown pale under fluorescent office lights. Looking back, I should have known better. Should have recognized the signs. The way Craig's smile never quite reached his eyes when he approved my vacation request. The sudden increase in urgent projects the week before I was supposed to leave. The casual comment about how challenging the next quarter was going to be. But I was tired. Bone deep, soul-crushing tired. The kind of tired that makes you ignore red flags because you're too exhausted to process them. The kind of tired that makes 2 weeks on a beach seem less like a vacation and more like a medical necessity. So I kept my head down, finished my projects, set my out-of-office message, and packed my bags. I was ready. God, I was so ready. I just didn't know that Craig had other plans. And I certainly didn't know that his other plans would be the beginning of his end. The email arrived at 4:47 p.m. on Thursday, less than 12 hours before my flight. I was at my desk, finishing the last of my handover notes, when the notification popped up, Craig Donnell. Subject line: Urgent, need to discuss your availability. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. Elena, please come to my office immediately. We need to discuss the Morrison Industries situation. Morrison Industries, a client I'd never worked with, had nothing to do with my department. I sat there for a moment, staring at the screen, feeling the familiar weight of dread settling in my chest. Then I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and walked to his corner office. Craig was on the phone when I knocked, but he waved me in with that impatient gesture I'd come to despise. His office was exactly what you'd expect: oversized desk, walls covered in meaningless awards, and photos of him shaking hands with people who looked as self-important as he did. I stood there for 5 minutes while he finished his call, discussing his weekend golf plans. Finally, he hung up and turned to me with that fake concerned expression he'd perfected over the years. Elena, thanks for coming. Have a seat. I remained standing. My flight leaves at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Craig. About that. He leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled. We've got a situation. Morrison Industries is threatening to pull their contract. Something about compliance issues with their new HR system. You're the only one who knows our compliance protocols inside and out. Jessica is fully trained on. Jessica doesn't have your experience. He cut me off, his tone shifting from fake concern to barely concealed irritation. This is a $3 million account. Elena, we can't afford to lose it because you want to work on your tan. Work on my tan. As if 2 years of 60-hour weeks had been leading up to nothing more than vanity. I have non-refundable tickets, hotel reservations. Everything's been approved for months. Craig shrugged. I'm sure you can reschedule. The company will cover any change fees. Of course. There are no changes available. It's peak season. Everything's booked solid until September. Then you'll go in September. He was already turning back to his computer, dismissing me. I need you here Monday morning, 7 a.m. sharp. We'll be doing a full audit of the Morrison account. I stood there, feeling something inside me shift. It wasn't anger. I'd felt anger before. This was different. Colder. Clearer. Will the company be reimbursing me for the full cost of my canceled vacation? He looked up, genuinely surprised by the question. Elena, we're all team players here. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the greater good. I see. And who else is sacrificing their vacation for this emergency? His face reddened slightly. That's not relevant. It's not? Because I noticed Brad from sales is still leaving for Cabo tomorrow. And didn't you just approve 2 weeks in the Hamptons for yourself starting Monday? That's different. My plans were made months ago. So were mine. We stared at each other for a moment. I could see the calculation in his eyes. How far could he push before I pushed back? The answer, as always, was that he could push as far as he wanted. Because what was I going to do? Quit? In this economy? With my mortgage? Elena. His voice took on that patronizing tone reserved for difficult women and slow children. I need you to be reasonable here. Your vacation can wait. Morrison Industries can't. I felt my hands unclench, my shoulders relaxed. A strange calm settled over me. Of course, Craig, I understand completely. He blinked, surprised by my sudden acquiescence. Good. I knew I could count on you. You're invaluable to this company. Elena, absolutely invaluable. Invaluable, but apparently not valuable enough to respect my time off. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. Just to be clear, you're ordering me to cancel my approved vacation to work on the Morrison account? I'm asking you to be a team player. But if I refuse? His smile was sharp. Well, I'd hate to think you're not as committed to BrightPath as we thought. That would certainly factor into year-end reviews. A threat? Politely delivered, but a threat nonetheless. I'll see you Monday at 7 a.m., I said. I knew you'd make the right choice. I walked back to my desk on autopilot, canceled my flight, forfeited my hotel reservation, sent a text to my sister saying I wouldn't make it to Florida after all. Her response was immediate. Again? Elena, you need to stand up to these people. But I wasn't going to stand up to them. I was going to do something much better. I was going to bury them. I sat at my desk until the office emptied, my vacation luggage still packed by my feet, and I smiled. Not the polite smile I wore like armor in this place, but a real one. Because Craig Donnell had just made a crucial error. He'd mistaken my professionalism for weakness, my silence for submission. He thought he'd won. He had no idea what was coming. That weekend, while my suitcase sat unpacked in my apartment and my beach clothes hung uselessly in the closet, I began my real work. Not the Morrison Industries audit, that was just Craig's power play. And we both knew it. No. I started researching something far more interesting. Connecticut labor law. I'd always been meticulous about documentation. It's what made me good at my job. Every email saved, every memo filed, every conversation followed up in writing. I'd thought I was just being professional. Turns out, I'd been building an arsenal. The Connecticut Department of Labor website became my new vacation destination. I spent hours reading through statutes, regulations, and case law. Did you know that in Connecticut, employers who cancel approved vacation time without legitimate business necessity can face penalties? Or that forcing employees to work during approved leave without proper compensation violates state wage and hour laws? Craig probably didn't. Why would he? He had HR to handle these details. HR being me. I pulled up my employee handbook, the one I'd written 3 years ago. Section 4.3. 2. Once approved, vacation time may only be revoked in cases of genuine business emergency, with full reimbursement of any non-refundable expenses incurred by the employee. Funny how Craig hadn't mentioned reimbursement beyond change fees. But this went deeper than just my canceled vacation. Once I started digging, I found a pattern. A disturbing, expensive pattern. I created a spreadsheet, password protected, backed up to my personal cloud. Started documenting every instance I could remember of vacation cancellations, unpaid overtime, and mysterious disappearing comp time. Then I got creative. Monday morning, I arrived at 7 a.m. as ordered. Craig wasn't there, of course. He rolled in at 9:30, coffee in hand, looking refreshed from his weekend. The Morrison Industries emergency? A few formatting issues with their reports that took me 2 hours to fix. Great work, Elena, Craig said, barely glancing at the completed audit. I knew I could count on you. Just doing my job, I replied. By the way, I was updating some old HR files and noticed we're missing documentation for several vacation cancellations over the past 2 years. Mind if I send out a general email asking people to confirm their records? For compliance purposes. He waved dismissively. Sure, whatever you need to do. The email went out that afternoon. Subject: Routine HR audit. Action required. I kept it simple, professional. Just asking employees to verify their vacation records and report any discrepancies. The responses started trickling in within hours. Louise from IT. Now that you mention it, I had to cancel my honeymoon last year when Craig said we had a critical system update. Spent 3 days at the office doing routine maintenance. Bridget from accounting. I lost a $2,000 cruise deposit when they called me back for year-end reports. Reports that weren't due for another month. Marisol from customer service. I've had 4 vacations canceled in 2 years. They told me it was just bad timing. Each response was carefully saved, forwarded to my personal email, and added to my growing documentation. But I needed more than just stories. I needed proof of a systematic pattern. That's when I discovered the real gold mine, the company's time tracking system. As HR manager, I had administrative access. I'd never thought to run certain reports before. Why would I? But now, I pulled 3 years of data. Overtime hours worked, but not paid. Vacation days approved, then revoked. Comp time earned, but never granted. The numbers were staggering. BrightPath Solutions had systematically denied employees over $500,000 in earned benefits over 3 years. And it was all there in black and white, in their own system. I started staying late, but not for the work Craig assigned me. I was building a case, cross-referencing timesheets with payroll records, matching vacation cancellations with project timelines, documenting every instance where a critical emergency turned out to be routine work that could have waited. The pattern was clear. Craig and the other executives would approve vacations, wait until employees had made non-refundable plans, then manufacture emergencies to force cancellations. They counted on people being too polite, too scared, or too tired to fight back. 3 weeks into my investigation, I found the smoking gun. An email thread between Craig and the CEO, joking about vacation chicken, seeing how close to departure they could wait before calling someone back. They had a scoring system. Craig was apparently the champion, having once called an employee back from the airport. I printed everything, made copies, organized it all into a comprehensive file that would make any labor attorney weep with joy. But I wasn't going to a lawyer. That would be too simple, too clean. Craig wanted me to be a team player? Fine, I was going to play for the biggest team of all, the Connecticut Department of Labor. But first, I needed to make sure my evidence reached the right people, and I needed to do it in a way that couldn't be traced back to me. Not because I was scared, I was past that, but because I wanted to watch Craig's world crumble while he had no idea who'd lit the fuse. I allowed myself one small pleasure during those weeks. Every morning, when Craig asked how I was doing, I'd smile brightly and say, "Just living the dream. Craig, living the dream." He thought I was being sarcastic. He had no idea how true it was. Because for the first time in years, I had a purpose beyond making his life easier. I was going to make his life hell. The next phase required patience. I'd always been good at playing the long game, but this was different. This was personal, every day. I showed up, did my job, smiled at Craig, and continued building my case. The hardest part was maintaining the facade while my colleagues suffered around me. During a lunch break in the 4th week, I overheard Bridget crying in the bathroom. Her daughter's graduation was coming up, but she was terrified to request time off. "What if they do to me what they did to you?" she asked when she saw me. "I can't afford to lose this job, but I can't miss Emma's graduation." I handed her a tissue. "Submit the request. Make sure to get the approval in writing." "But what if?" "Trust me. Submit the request." Something in my voice must have convinced her. She submitted it that afternoon. When Craig approved it without hesitation, I knew why. He was saving his next emergency for someone else. Someone who'd already proven they'd comply. Someone like me. I expanded my network carefully. Coffee runs became intelligence-gathering missions. I'd casually mention updating HR policies and watch people open up about their experiences. The stories were heartbreakingly similar. Marcus from marketing had missed his father's surgery. Jennifer from legal had lost her deposit on her wedding venue. Tom from sales had to cancel his family reunion, the first in 10 years. Each story added weight to my documentation. But I needed more than employee testimonies. I needed to prove financial fraud. That's when I discovered Craig's expense reports. As HR manager, I had access to executive expense accounts for compliance reviews. I'd never looked too closely before. That was accounting's job. But now, I reviewed 3 years of Craig's submissions. What I found made my blood boil. Those critical client emergencies that forced us to cancel vacations. Half of them coincided with Craig's golf tournaments. The Morrison Industries crisis that ruined my Florida trip. Craig had been at a wine tasting in Napa that weekend, charging it to the company as client relationship building. He wasn't just stealing our time. He was stealing from the company while doing it. I documented everything. Cross-referenced his expense reports with the emergencies that had destroyed our personal lives. The pattern was undeniable. Craig would schedule his leisure activities, create fake emergencies to ensure coverage, then bill his fund to the company while we lost money on canceled plans. One night, working late again, I found myself laughing. Actually laughing alone in my cubicle. Because I'd discovered something beautiful in its audacity. Craig had once charged the company for a working dinner at a restaurant in Miami on the same night he'd called Luis back from his honeymoon for a server emergency. The server emergency? A routine update that could have waited a week. I took photos of everything, backed up files to multiple secure locations, created a timeline that would make any investigator's job easy. But I still needed one more thing, evidence that upper management knew and approved of these practices. That's when Marisol became my unwitting ally. Elena, you know how you asked about vacation records? She said one afternoon. I found something weird in my old emails. She showed me a forwarded message from 2 years ago. The CEO had sent a memo to all department heads about maximizing employee availability during peak periods. Attached was a presentation Craig had created, outlining strategies for voluntary vacation rescheduling. Voluntary. I almost choked on my coffee. The presentation was a masterclass in corporate doublespeak. It discussed incentivizing flexibility and encouraging team commitment, code for making people too scared to use their benefits. There was even a slide about optimal timing for schedule adjustments that recommended waiting until employees had financially committed to their plans. They'd put it in writing. They'd actually documented their scheme to exploit us. Marisol had no idea what she'd just handed me. Is this helpful for your audit? Very helpful, I managed. Would you mind forwarding this to me, for the files? She did, adding, it's nice that someone's finally organizing all this stuff. Sometimes I feel like no one's paying attention to what goes on here. Oh, I was paying attention. I was paying very close attention. By week 6, I had everything. Documentation of over 200 illegally canceled vacations, proof of $500,000 in stolen wages and benefits, evidence of systematic expense fraud, written confirmation of management's knowledge and approval, testimony from 47 current and former employees. The file was thick enough to kill someone if dropped from sufficient height, which, metaphorically speaking, was exactly what I planned to do. But I couldn't just submit it myself. That would be too obvious. Craig might be arrogant, but he wasn't stupid. If a complaint showed up right after he'd canceled my vacation, he'd know it was me. I needed distance. I needed plausible deniability. I needed to be above suspicion when the hammer fell. So I did what any good HR professional would do. I scheduled a meeting with Craig to discuss improving employee satisfaction. I even brought cookies. I've been thinking, I said, watching him devour his third chocolate chip cookie. Maybe we should review our vacation policies, make sure we're compliant with all state regulations. He waved dismissively, spraying crumbs. Elena, you worry too much. We've never had any problems. Of course not. I agreed. I just want to make sure we stay that way. That's why you're so valuable, he said, reaching for another cookie. Always thinking ahead. Unlike some people around here, you understand priorities. I smiled. I certainly do. That night, I went home and prepared the final package. Everything organized, indexed, and cross-referenced. A roadmap to corporate malfeasance so clear a child could follow it. All it needed now was the right recipient. The package went out on a Thursday evening. Not from my apartment. I wasn't that careless. I drove 2 towns over, paid cash at a FedEx store, and used a prepaid shipping label I'd bought with a gift card. The security camera would show a woman in sunglasses and a baseball cap. Could be anyone. 3 copies. 1 to the Connecticut Department of Labor. 1 to the State Attorney General's office. 1 to Rachel Morrison, the investigative journalist at the Hartford Courant who'd won awards for exposing corporate corruption. Each package contained the same thing, 347 pages of meticulously documented evidence. a USB drive with digital copies, and an anonymous cover letter explaining the systematic wage theft at BrightPath Solutions. I went to work Friday morning like nothing had happened. Craig was in rare form, bragging about landing a new client while complaining about having to carry the dead weight in the company. I nodded along, filed his expense report for another suspicious client dinner, and counted down the hours. The first sign came Monday afternoon. Craig's assistant knocked on my door, looking nervous. "Elena, Craig wants to see you. He seems upset." I found him in his office, face red, phone pressed to his ear. He waved me in impatiently, and I caught the tail end of his conversation. "Don't care what it takes. Find out who." "Yes, I understand the implications." "No, that's impossible. We've always been compliant." He slammed the phone down and turned to me. "We have a problem." I arranged my face into an expression of concern. "What's wrong?" "Someone sent a complaint to the Department of Labor, anonymous. They're opening an investigation." "Into what?" "Vacation policies, overtime, complete bullshit." He ran his hands through his hair. "I need you to pull all our compliance documentation. Prove we've done nothing wrong." "Of course. When do they want it?" "Yesterday." He grabbed his jacket. "I have to meet with legal. I want everything on my desk by morning." I spent the night at the office, all right, but not preparing a defense. Instead, I made sure every piece of evidence was exactly where investigators would find it. I even created helpful folders: canceled vacations, unpaid overtime, executive expense irregularities. When auditors arrived, they'd think Christmas had come early. Tuesday's Hartford Courant ran Rachel Morrison's article on page 1. Tech firm under investigation for systematic wage theft. She'd done her homework, confirming details with multiple sources. The article mentioned hundreds of thousands in stolen wages and a culture of exploitation masked by corporate rhetoric. By Wednesday, the Department of Labor investigators had arrived. Two severe-looking women in dark suits who set up camp in our conference room. They asked for specific documents I'd helpfully organized the night before. "We'll need access to the time tracking system," the lead investigator said. "Of course," I replied. "I've actually prepared a summary report of just the raw data, please." Even better, the raw data told the story more damning than any summary could. Craig called an emergency all-hands meeting Thursday morning. He stood at the podium, trying to project confidence while sweat stained his collar. "I want to address the malicious rumors in the media," he began. "BrightPath Solutions has always operated with the highest ethical standards. These accusations are baseless, probably from a disgruntled former employee trying to damage our reputation." I sat in the third row, taking notes like a dutiful HR manager. Around me, employees whispered, some looked hopeful, others skeptical. Bridget caught my eye and raised an eyebrow. I gave her the tiniest shrug. "Anyone who speaks to investigators without legal presence will face immediate termination." Craig continued. "We need to present a united front against these false accusations." That's when Marcus stood up. "What about my missed father's surgery? Was that false?" "Sit down," Craig snapped. "We'll discuss individual concerns privately." But Marcus didn't sit. "No. We'll discuss it now. You told me the Richmond project was critical. I found out later you were at a golf tournament." The room erupted. Years of suppressed frustration boiled over. People shouting about missed graduations, lost deposits, family events that could never be recreated. Craig tried to restore order, but the dam had broken. I slipped out during the chaos and found the investigators in the conference room. "Sounds like an interesting meeting," the lead investigator said. "Routine team-building exercise," I replied with a straight face. She almost smiled. "Ms. Moss, we'll need to interview you tomorrow. As HR manager, your insights would be valuable." "I'll cooperate fully," I said. "I have nothing to hide." That night, Craig called me at home. First time in 5 years. Elena, I need you to be smart about this, he said without preamble. We've been a good team. I've taken care of you. Have you? Don't play games. You know how this works. The company protects those who protect it. Like you protected my vacation? Silence. Then, that was business. This is personal. Don't make it worse than it needs to be. Good night, Craig. Elena. I hung up. Friday morning, the news got worse. The Attorney General's office had joined the investigation. Someone had leaked Craig's expense reports to Rachel Morrison. The headline read, "Executive lived large while employees lost thousands." By noon, 3 more employees had filed formal complaints. By 2 p.m., the CEO had released a statement promising full cooperation and appropriate action if any wrongdoing is discovered. By 3 p.m., Craig's office was being searched. I watched from my desk as they carried out boxes of files. Craig stood in the hallway, on his phone with what I assumed was his lawyer. He caught my eye as they led him to the conference room for questioning. For just a moment, I saw it in his face. Not anger, not fear, recognition. He knew, but knowing and proving are two different things. And I'd been very, very careful. The investigation would take weeks, maybe months. But the ending was already written. The evidence was too overwhelming, the pattern too clear. BrightPath Solutions was about to learn what happened when you treated people like disposable resources. And somewhere in Florida, a beach chair was still waiting for me. The final blow came 3 weeks later, on a gray Monday morning that seemed fitting for corporate executions. I arrived at work to find the parking lot buzzing with activity, news vans, reporters, and a small crowd of former employees who'd driven in to witness the spectacle. The lobby was chaos. Security guards tried to maintain order while executives huddled in corners, speaking in hushed, panicked tones. I badged in like any other day, coffee in hand, wearing my best navy suit. If this was going to be a funeral, I was dressed appropriately. The email had gone out at 6 a.m., mandatory all-hands meeting, 9 a.m., main auditorium. No subject line explanation needed. We all knew what was coming. At my desk, I found Bridget, Luis, and Marisol waiting for me. "Is it true?" Bridget whispered. "About the 100,000? I set down my coffee carefully. "Is what true?" "The fine," Luis said. "Someone leaked it to Rachel Morrison. The Department of Labor is fining BrightPath $100,000 for labor violations. Plus back wages." Marisol added, "My cousin works at the courthouse. She says it could be another $400,000 in restitution." I pulled up the Hartford Courant website. There it was, breaking news. BrightPath Solutions faces 6-figure penalties in wage theft case. The article detailed systematic violations dating back 5 years, a culture of exploitation, and executive malfeasance at the highest levels. Craig's name appeared 17 times. "Elena." Bridget touched my arm. "Did you know? When you asked for those records, did you know this would happen?" I met her eyes steadily. "I'm just an HR manager. Bridget. I organize files and process paperwork." She studied my face for a moment, then smiled. "Right. Of course." The auditorium was standing room only. Employees, investigators, reporters who'd somehow gained access, and a phalanx of lawyers flanking the CEO. Craig sat in the front row, his usual swagger replaced by something that looked like fear. The CEO took the podium. In 20 years of corporate speak, I'd never heard him sound so human. "BrightPath Solutions has failed you," he began. No preamble, no excuses. "The investigation has revealed systematic violations of labor law, orchestrated by certain members of our leadership team." He detailed the findings: 237 illegally canceled vacations, $478,000 in unpaid wages, fraudulent expense reporting totaling over $200,000. The numbers were even worse than my documentation had shown. Apparently, I'd only scratched the surface. Effective immediately, Craig Donnell is terminated for cause. A ripple went through the crowd. Criminal charges may follow. 3 other executives are also being released. He promised full restitution, reformed policies, and a new chapter for BrightPath. The $100,000 fine was just the beginning. The company faced additional civil penalties and potential criminal prosecution. I felt my phone buzz. A text from an unknown number. You think you're clever, but I know it was you. Craig, I deleted it without responding. The meeting ended with HR, my department, being tasked with calculating restitution payments. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. I spent the rest of the day fielding questions, processing paperwork, and maintaining my professional facade. At 4:30, security escorted Craig out. They'd given him 30 minutes to pack under supervision. I happened to be walking past as they led him through the lobby, his career reduced to a cardboard box of personal items. He stopped when he saw me. Security tensed, but he just stood there, looking at me with something between rage and bewilderment. Why? He asked simply. I could have walked away. Should have. But I'd earned this moment. You were right, Craig. I am invaluable. You just never bothered to calculate my value correctly. This won't end here, he said as security urged him forward. You'll what? Sue me for doing my job, for maintaining accurate records, for cooperating with a lawful investigation? I smiled pleasantly. Good luck with that. They led him out to a waiting taxi. His company car had already been reclaimed. Through the glass doors, I watched him fumble with his phone, probably calling his lawyer, or maybe his wife, who'd learned about the expense account fraud along with everyone else. That evening, I typed a simple resignation letter. 2 sentences. I hereby resign from my position as HR manager at BrightPath Solutions, effective 2 weeks from today's date. Thank you for the opportunities provided during my employment. I'd stayed long enough to see justice served. Now it was time for my real vacation. The next morning, headlines screamed about corporate corruption and white-collar crime. Rachel Morrison had published a follow-up piece about the anonymous whistleblower who exposed systematic wage theft. She speculated about their identity, suggesting it was likely a brave employee who risked everything to stand up for their colleagues. I read it over breakfast, already planning my Florida itinerary. 2 weeks' notice would give me time to tie up loose ends, ensure smooth transitions, and book new flights. This time, I opted for first class. I'd earned it. Bridget stopped by my desk that afternoon. You're glowing, she said. Haven't seen you look this relaxed in years. Just thinking about the beach, I replied. Is that where you're going, after your notice period? I hadn't told anyone about my resignation yet, but Bridget had always been perceptive. Maybe, I said. Seems like a good time for a vacation. She smiled knowingly. You know, my daughter wants to go into HR. Says she wants to help people, make sure companies treat their employees fairly. I used to discourage her, but lately. She looked around the office, where people were actually smiling for once. Lately, I think maybe she's onto something. Tell her to always keep good records, I said. You never know when documentation might come in handy. I'll do that. She paused at my door. Elena? Thank you. For whatever you did or didn't do. Thank you. After she left, I pulled up travel sites. Florida was nice, but maybe I'd start with something different. Europe, perhaps? Or New Zealand. For the first time in years, I had options. My phone buzzed. Another unknown number. This time, I answered. Ms. Moss. This is Rebecca Chen from Morrison Industries. We heard about the situation at BrightPath, and we're impressed by how professionally everything was handled. We're looking for a new VP of Human Resources, someone with integrity. Would you be interested in discussing the position? I leaned back in my chair, considering. I appreciate the call, Ms. Chen. But I'm about to take an extended vacation, my first in 2 years. Of course. When you're ready, we'd love to talk. We believe in respecting our employees' time off. After ending the call, I smiled. Maybe I'd take that meeting. eventually. But first, I had a promise to keep to myself. A promise involving white sand, blue water, and a $100,000 view. 6 weeks later, I was exactly where I should have been all along, stretched out on a beach chair in Sanibel Island, Florida, watching the sun paint the Gulf of Mexico in shades of gold and coral. The sand was warm between my toes, the cocktail was cold in my hand, and my phone had been on silent for 3 days. The news alert popped up anyway. Former tech executive Craig Donnell charged with embezzlement and wire fraud. I allowed myself a small smile before closing the notification. Rachel Morrison had sent me the article earlier. 15 federal charges, potential 20 years in prison, assets frozen pending investigation. Turns out when investigators started digging into his expense accounts, they found much more than anyone expected. Offshore accounts, kickbacks from vendors, a whole web of corruption that made wage theft look quaint. I lifted my mojito in a silent toast to karma, then went back to my book. The beach wasn't as crowded as I'd expected for peak season. A few families, some retirees, a couple on their honeymoon taking selfies by the shore. Normal people living normal lives, taking vacations they'd earned without fear of last-minute cancellations. My phone buzzed. Morrison Industries again. The third call this week. I'd told them I'd consider their offer after my vacation, but they were persistent. The salary they mentioned was double what I'd made at BrightPath, plus guaranteed vacation time that couldn't be revoked for any reason. They'd even written it into the contract. Maybe I'd take the job, maybe I wouldn't. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't need to make decisions based on fear or financial pressure. The restitution check from BrightPath had been substantial. 2 years of unpaid overtime adds up. Combined with my savings and the settlement they'd offered to avoid a personal lawsuit, I had options. But that was future Elena's problem. Present Elena had a more pressing concern, whether to order another mojito or switch to piña coladas. A text from Bridget interrupted my deliberation. Saw the news about Craig, also saw BrightPath stock drop 30%. Couldn't have happened to a nicer company. P.S. Living vicariously through your beach photos, enjoy every minute. I snapped a photo of my view. Pristine beach, turquoise water, not a spreadsheet in sight, and sent it back with a simple caption. I am. Luis had started a group chat for BrightPath survivors. The messages were equal parts schadenfreude and support. Many had found better jobs already. Companies that had heard about the scandal and wanted to poach ethical employees. Others were taking their own long overdue vacations. Jennifer had finally gotten married at that venue, sending photos from Tuscany. Marcus's father had recovered from his surgery, and they were planning a fishing trip. The waitress appeared with another mojito. From the gentleman at the bar, she said, pointing to a man in an expensive suit. He wanted to know if you're the whistleblower from that tech company scandal. I looked over. Reporter, probably. Or maybe a headhunter. These days, it could be either. Tell him I'm just a tourist, I said. Enjoying my vacation. She laughed. I'll do that. But between you and me. Good for you. My daughter works in tech. These companies need to learn they can't treat people like garbage. After she left, I considered moving hotels. I'd been recognized 3 times this week, despite never confirming my role in BrightPath's downfall. But why should I run? I'd done nothing wrong. For once in my life, I'd stood up not just for myself, but for everyone who'd been silenced by the fear of losing their livelihood. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of justice. Somewhere in Connecticut, investigators were still unraveling BrightPath's crimes. Former executives were meeting with lawyers, trying to save themselves. The Department of Labor was drafting new regulations inspired by our case. And Craig? Craig was probably sitting in a federal holding cell, wondering how his perfect corporate life had crumbled so completely. All because he couldn't let one employee take a well-earned vacation. I finished my mojito and stood, brushing sand from my sundress. Tomorrow, I'd try parasailing, or maybe deep-sea fishing. Or perhaps I'd do absolutely nothing at all. The beauty of finally taking this vacation was that every choice was mine. As I walked back to my hotel, phone buzzing with messages I'd ignore until morning, I thought about Craig's last words to me. This won't end here. He was right about that. At least, it hadn't ended there. It had ended here, with me on a beach in Florida, finally taking the vacation I'd earned. Living well wasn't just the best revenge, it was the only revenge worth having. The hotel lobby was cool and welcoming. The concierge nodded as I passed. Good evening, Ms. Moss. Enjoying your stay? Every minute, I said, and meant it, in my room. I opened the sliding door to let in the sound of waves. Somewhere out there, other employees were fighting their own battles against corporate exploitation. Maybe my story would inspire them, maybe it wouldn't, but at least they'd know it was possible to win. I poured myself a glass of wine from the bottle I'd been saving, a good vintage, purchased with my first restitution check. As I raised it to my lips, my phone lit up with one final notification. BrightPath Solutions. Files for Chapter 11, Bankruptcy. I turned the phone face down and took a long, satisfying sip. I think I'll extend my stay another week. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope you enjoyed this tale of corporate karma and sweet revenge. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. Whether you're in your car during a commute, at home, relaxing, or maybe even plotting your own workplace justice, I want to hear from you. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel for more real-life revenge stories and share your own thoughts and experiences in the comments. Have you ever had a boss who pushed you too far? Let's discuss.